Hey everyone, so in this video I want to talk about an interesting system against the Sicilian based on the Grand-Prix, and I'm going to show you the main lines and some of the sidelines, the justification as to why I recommend some of these lines. But most of all, it's a very easy system to play. As long as you remember some of the key traps and key ideas, you can play it based off of instinct, and like where to place pieces and such. Admittedly, like the Grand-Prix has gone out of fashion. I mean, of course, in classical chess it's like never played because I think that black has many ways to achieve equality objectively, but in blitz I found this to be especially useful and especially practical. So I want to show some of these games. First off, this is a classical game played by international master Jin from South Korea against Aryan Tari. And this was a very nice game actually by Jin. So he starts with e4. Tari responds with c5, knight c3. So this is the main move order. The downside of this move order, of course, is that black has many systems. Like they can play a6 here, intending to play b5 directly. Normally the main line goes like something like g3, developing the bishop to g2. We get a position like this, more or less. And I'll talk about this in a bit more detail. There are also other systems. For example, black normally plays the move knight c6 here. And this is sort of a flexible way to meet the close Sicilian. Because black has not played the move d6 yet, meaning that if they want to, they can advance with e6 d5. There is also another way to play, which is just d6 directly, but this allows multiple different systems. In this video, we're going to be talking about f4 as well, the signature move of the Grand-Prix. But it's also possible to go for d4, which is known as the Magnus Sicilian. And I made a video for black talking about this variation, and the theory normally goes something like cd4, queen d4, knight c6, queen d2. White prepares b3, bishop b2, but in my video I make a case for the move g6 for black, and after b3, bishop h6, f4, and then this move f5 here. This is kind of the way that I like to play as black, but yeah, still objectively equal. It's just that I think black has a nice game. So that's possible. Though possibly, if you want to stay consistent with the Grand-Prix, then f4 is a more practical way to do it. But yeah, we do see that when black does play the move d6, then it sort of takes away the sting out of any e6 d5 directly. So in this sort of position, I think it makes sense to put the bishop on c4. But depending, if black puts the knight on c6, then putting the bishop to b5 makes a lot of sense because it can threaten some ideas of doubling the pawns in the future. So yeah, that's in general with the different setups that are possible. But in this game, I think black chose the most flexible move, which is knight c6. Not moving the d pawn so that later maybe e6 and d5 can be played in one go. So here, white plays move f4, and now black plays g6. So the entire problem behind the Grand-Prix for white is fundamentally white's weakening or lack of control over the d4 square, because white has not played the pawn to d4, so black's best setup is to basically put a bishop on the long diagonal and prevent black from being able to play d4. That's one of the downsides, and we can see that with the move f4, you can say that it's sort of like weakening the king side, this sort of diagonal, but that's not really the case. As in a lot of Scheveningen Sicilians, Taimanov Sicilians, even some, like a Najdorf Sicilians, f4 is a very typical move that you play anyways, so it's not that weakening in that sense. But yeah, so g6, white plays knight f3, after bishop g7, here there are two main moves basically, which is to play the move bishop e5 or the move bishop c4. Now there are issues with both of these moves essentially, which is that after bishop c4, okay, I mean, this targets the f7 pawn, which is the weakest pawn on the board, normally. But the problem is that it gets hit with e6 and d5 directly. And here, the main line is to play the move f5, but I've made a video also on the Grand-Prix for black, and I believe that this move is just simply an inaccuracy because of g takes f5. If now you play e takes f5, then black plays d5. And these positions are really nice for black. After knight e7, you can take on e6, but then black is simply happy in this sort of position because black has a huge center, and a really dominant control over the d4 square. So I believe that black is doing very well here. And so that's one of the issues if you play f5. And if you don't play f5, let's say we castle, knight e7, and let's say you play d3 here, black can play d5 and directly in one go. So these positions are also accepted to be quite comfortable for black. So this is the situation that you sort of want to avoid if you're playing the Grand-Prix as white, is to avoid black playing e6 and d5 one go. Now, if you play the move bishop b5, the issue is that black has the move knight d4. Now, it's possible to play this way. Normally, the main line goes something like castles. Black can take on b5, knight takes b5. D5 here is normally the way to go. E takes d5 or e5, like this is possible. a6, knight c3, knight f6. And we get a position like this where black is going to take the pawn on d5 next. Black has a bit more space, more control over the center, especially this square on d4. And yeah, I believe that, I mean, white can certainly play d4 here, but normally these sort of positions are quite comfortable for black with the bishop here, right? So That's sort of the issue. Also, after knight d4 and white castles, Praggnanandhaa has tried this once, the move f5 once against Tari as well. So very interesting. And I played this idea as well in my classical game, like maybe a year and a half ago or something. And I ended up winning the game, but I definitely learned a lot of things from that encounter. And I'll link the video up here. So yeah, a very interesting move. I think that this move f5 also holds objectively. But yeah, so there's some technical problems behind the move bishop c4 and bishop e5. And then I was looking for like some different ways to maybe enter a different sideline, maybe like g3 in this sort of position. But then suddenly I stumbled upon the move a4 here. And this is such an interesting system because normally the move that, against bishop b5 and bishop c4 especially, e6 is especially effective because the bishop can get hit with d5, right? But when you play a move like a4, it doesn't commit any of your cards. And so black is sort of like left with a decision here. Where do they want to place their pieces here? And so here there are a lot of setups. There's a move e6, there's a move d6, there's a move a6 essentially. And we can look at the sort of pawn structure more than like the specific like move order, I think that whenever black plays d6, in this sort of position, I like to play the move bishop e5. The idea is that, if you like play your normal setup, let's say knight f6, we castle, black castles. Here, black is maybe intending knight d4 because they've already castled and got on off the pin. But here, I like the move bishop takes c6, followed by the move d3. Now you're supporting the center, you're ready with queen e1 to queen h4, and I think that white has a pretty comfortable game here. Not a lot of games have been seen here, but I believe that black is maybe, is under a bit of pressure, essentially. Now, if you play the pawn to e6, which is what happened in this game, and it's normally the idea, is to meet bishop c4 with e6. So what is the big issue about behind the move e6? And if you'll notice, in the database already, white has a really good result here because white has a very nice move e5. Now, after e5, it suddenly... You can suddenly see that the d6 square is very weak here. So black essentially has like one move to equalize, and it is the move d6, which is played in this game. Now, a lot of people go for the move d5, but I will make a case for the move d4, and white I think is significantly better here already. After c takes d4, it's important to play the move knight d5, intending knight d6. And black can, for example, here, I mean, the best move is probably like bishop f8 or something back, but if we get a position like this, then it's clear to see that white can just play c3, bishop e3, bishop e2, castles, and white just has a great version of like the French defense because black is committed to pawn to g6, and their bishop on g7 anyways, like a move ago, was already like quite bad. And some people have played this move against me, knight e6, but after knight d6, king f8, here I think after bishop e3, white is significantly better. Knight g5 is coming potentially. It's just important that you don't play the move queen takes d4 here, because it's possible that black can play queen takes d6 and exchange off the queens like this. So this is possible, and I don't think this is the direction you want to go. I also blundered, I think. This is just a queen blunder. I think just like 10 minutes ago, I blundered the move knight takes d4 here, which allows this sequence, and then I was just lost. So yeah, that's one trick to remember as well, is to just like not hurry to take this pawn on d4 back, but instead just play bishop d3 and enjoy a nice advantage. So yeah, in this position, d6 is better because it does not give away, it does not allow this idea of playing d4 and opening up the center like that. So, or rather, yeah, I mean, for white to keep the center closed and, stick a knight on d6, for example. But here in this position after d6, white has to move bishop b5. And white's simple idea is to just play knight e4, attack the d6 pawn, and potentially infiltrate this f6 if black is not careful. So the game continues knight e7. This is still considered to be the main line. White plays knight e4. Now black takes on e5, f takes e5, and after castles here, white has to move knight f6 check. Now this is very interesting, but the point is that here black's best move is to play bishop takes f6. But most people actually decide to play the move king h8. But it's which was seen in this game as well. So Tari, being a very strong grandmaster, also made a mistake with this move. The best move is bishop takes f6, followed by knight f5 here. But oftentimes, yeah, white just sacrifices the pawn and gets tremendous compensation. So we will be investigating this a bit deeper after this game. But in this game, black played king h8, and this allowed white to play d4. So yeah, Hong Jinan was very well prepared. After d4, black plays knight d5, which is not best. Here, one of the key ideas is actually that black maybe wants to take on d4 with the knight. So we actually release attention by playing bishop takes c6. And now we have a structural advantage because of the double pawns. But also, here, very simple, just to play d6 c5. And this would have been an improvement over the game. In the game, Hongjin played the move 94, which, you know, where we entered this sort of position where Black was still struggling, but yeah, eventually, like, the game ended in a draw. But I believe that simplest is just to play d6 c5 here. And I'll show you a few lines here. After bishop a6, preventing castling, White can play bishop g5, creating some discovered attacks, you know, some threats here. But after h6 here, this is probably what Hongjin was like worried about. But White has a very nice move h4 here. And the bishop is simply immune to capture, so you should never really worry about it. The best move in the position is to play queen d8, getting out of any discovered attacks. King f2, queen takes b2. Now we can take on d5, and then play bishop e7, sticking the bishop on d6 here. And already we're attacking the rook. Black's best move is to play queen c3. If they play, for example, rook b4, something like this, White can play the move rook b1, queen to a3, exchange off the rooks, and then play queen d4. Now, if we exchange off in this endgame, like, this is simply domination with the pawn on e5. I mean, the pawn on c6 is weak. Pawn on e5 is restricting the bishop on g7. This is a fantastic, like, advantage for White already. Instead, Black's best move is bishop c4, but White plays rook a1, for example, rook e8, and now pushes the pawn to a5. If we can get the pawn to a6, it would be a very strong, like, potential pass pawn. And one of the key ideas here is just to play knight d2, take the bishop off the board, and enjoy a very nice structural advantage and activity with the pieces, right? So, for example, something like this would be already really good for White. But this was the best line according to the computer. Yeah, but instead, like, queen c3 rook b1, and yeah, in this position also, like, White has a very nice advantage. Black can't really get away or get rid of, like, this bind. If you take on b1 here, which is probably best, after queen takes b1 here, White just dominates the b file and has a very nice advantage. The king, it's a bit exposed, but there are no, like, checks here that can be given. So it's a really nice position for White. So yeah, that's, like, it really shows the power of this opening, even against, like, a very strong grandmaster, because once you get them out of preparation, potentially, like, you can trick them and get you know, and get your preparation on the board. So this a4 idea, I believe, is interesting and might just, like, be the case as to why the system is playable. I mean, bishop c4 and bishop b5 seems to be, like, giving Black a perfectly good game. So I believe a4 is quite an interesting suggestion. Here's another game I want to show as well that I played in Blitz. Like, I think this was, like, maybe half a year ago against this strong WFM yeah, on chess.com. And we played Blitz here. And, okay, continue with the moves. f4. Okay, we can see already with the move d6 here, I already understood that, you know, Black is taking a bit of a slower approach. So as soon as Black plays knight c6, I want to play knight f3, and then now bishop b5. Again, introducing ideas of bishop takes c6. And once Black plays bishop d7, here I would be happy to take on c6, followed by a4. So the problem is that if I castle now, Black can play b5 here and get some really quick counterplay. So that's the reason that White should play a4 first. After bishop g7, d3. There was a threat of bishop takes c3 followed by bishop takes c4. So it's important to defend the center. Black plays knight f6, castles, and queen e1. Now we would transpose into what we see in the game. But in this game, after bishop g7, I castled. Black plays knight f6, and now I play d3. Black castled, and now as soon as the knight is ready to jump to d4, because they've escaped the pin, now I take on c6, followed by queen e1. Now we can see in this position that there was no need to play a4, right? Because Black was not threatening to advance a pawn with b5. Now, if we look at the database as well, White has a very nice score here, because I believe that the knight on f6 is actually a bit misplaced. It would rather be on e7, so that later we can see that the queen's diagonal is sort of a bit more open here. And yeah, Black has potential ideas of playing f5 as well. So here, after rook b8, in this game, I played the move f5. Now, what I realized after the game was that there's a very strong idea here, which is just to play b3. And now, the point is to get the pawn out of danger. And it's not to put the bishop on b2, because oftentimes we want to play, actually, bring the bishop out this way and bring the bishop to h6, right? But the idea is to just get the pawn out of the way and preventing Black from playing c4. So, for example, I've analyzed here after knight h5, White can play rook b1, queen b6 is best, or has been seen once before, king h1, bishop g4, just developing bishop d2, e5, and now f5. This is, again, a very typical break that White has to know. If Black plays g takes f5, then after e takes f5, bishop f5, knight h4, bishop g6, and knight f5, this is, like, crushing. Black cannot play f5 here, and all of the pieces are coming to the attack with queen h4, knight e4, and this is just crushing. So, best is just to play bishop takes f3, but in this position, we can see that here White has a very nice initiative, and in this position White played a really nice move f6 here, because Black wants to, like, sort of close out the position with f6, so it's best to prevent that and play f6 directly. Bishop f6, now rook f1. For the sake of one pawn, all of the lines are completely open. King g7, g3, preventing any ideas of knight f4, also very useful in general. Here, now knight to d1 was really nice. The idea is also potentially knight e3. queen e6, rook f5, h6, now queen f3, king to g6, trying to defend the knight on h5, but now h4, and this is just like a crushing position. Queen g4 here, and this was just like, yeah, crushing, and eventually like white won with this nice tactic. Knight d2, yeah, I mean, knight f2, knight g4, and this was just really nice. Conversion also was quite clean in this game. So yeah, essentially, like, I've realized after the game that b3 is actually a better move, and this entire idea of just playing rook b1, getting the rook out of like the long diagonal, so that later we can actually activate the bishop on this diagonal, right? Also, we noticed that king h1 is generally like quite a nice prophylactic move as well. But in this game, I played f5. And here, the point is that if black plays g takes f5, here I want to just play queen h4. Black can maybe try to defend with e5, but now I can take on f5, bishop f5, and now knight takes e5, right? D takes e5, rook takes f5, and now the black king is like completely exposed. Black can probably play a move like queen d4 here, but I don't want to straighten the pawns. I think best is just to probably play a move like queen f2 here. And that's what I'm expecting, but yeah, queen f2. Now, okay, black can maybe play knight g4, and this is probably the issue about why black can objectively equalize, but yeah, this sort of position, like, what does... Yeah, black has some like double pawns. I would see no reason that this position is not just like at least a bit more playable for white, you know. So that's possible, but instead my opponent went knight d7, trying to meet queen h4 by bringing the pawn up the board and trying to trade queens, right? This is the idea. But now here I play queen h4, black played knight e5, trying to defend, but now I play knight g5. This is quite a typical idea as well. Thematic idea just to attack h7, and now here black plays h6, because if they play h5, then I have ideas in the future of playing g4, right? So that's why black played h6 here, but now I bring the knight over to h3. Now I'm attacking the h6 pawn. If black plays g5 here, I'm perfectly happy to sacrifice the bishop with bishop h5. And this will be very similar to what happened in the game. In the game, black played h5, but now I play bishop g5. Quite nice, like attacking the e7 pawn. Black plays f6, but this is already like really bad. I play bishop c1 because, okay, just defends the b2 pawn, gets rid of any danger, and here the black position is just so exposed. If black plays queen e8, trying to defend, after g6, here black can play f5, and this is probably best and gives black an okay game, but it's very difficult to see this sequence. And then here after bishop h8, black is equal, but it's, you know, it's whether black will find this sequence or not, it's really like, I mean, we can clearly see that white has a nice edge, essentially, regardless of the evaluation. Here my opponent played d5, which sort of makes sense. You know, you are getting hit on the flank, so you want to sort of strike in the center. But the problem is after f takes g6 here, yeah, then the h5 pawn is just falling here. And my opponent played bishop g4, but now I play knight f4, attacking h5 next, d takes e4, knight takes h5, and my opponent simply resigned here already. Oh yeah, I think that there was some tactics here that I wanted to show, which I've gotten actually in some games, which is once black plays g5 here, we can get knight takes g5, rook to e8, queen h7, and now knight e6. I've actually gotten this position like once before, actually, I think, if not twice. F takes e6, takes, bishop f6, and now queen h8 is just made. So this can occur in your own games, I believe, but it's just, you know, depending on which system black chooses, you can get this sort of structure or the e6 sort of structures, and you sort of need to get experience in both of them, I believe. So now let's get to the theory section. So after knight c3 here, oh, by the way, it's also important to know that the move f4 here is actually inaccurate, because if you want to play the Grand-Prix this way, it runs into the move d5. Now, if you play the move e5, then black can play knight c6, for example, and they get a very nice version of the French defense once they put the pawn on e6, but they can develop the bishop out. For example, as soon as white plays knight f3, black can play bishop g4, potentially like removing the knight off the board, so that later it no longer controls the d4 square, right? And so black is fighting for control of the d4, and since white has not put a pawn there, black is simply better. So that's the issue. For example, after d5, if you play e takes d5, black can play the move knight f6. And if you try to hold onto the pawn this way with c4, black can simply sacrifice it with the move e6. And okay, they want to take on d5 next. So I mean, yeah, if you take on e6 here, for example, black already actually has a nice advantage here because they have clamp over the d4 square. As long as white is not able to push d4, white's king side is completely exposed here. So black is already better here in this position. Like, it sort of plays itself. Knight f3, knight c6, bishop e2, bishop d6, d3, defending the f4 pawn, queen c7, and black, you know, white's just struggling here basically. Yeah, black already has a nice advantage. Black can castle long after queen c7 and has a nice game. So that's the issue about the move f4 on the second move. Now, white can play knight c3 here. And in this position, there are a lot of moves. I'll cover them maybe from the most popular, which is the move knight c6, and the reason that I wanted to make this video in the first place. So yeah, after white plays f4, here, black can play the move e6. which is a possible try. But white can play knight f3 here. So of course, normally we develop both of the knights first before ever committing the bishop, or maybe pawn to a4 and such. So in this position, yeah, the question is what happens if black goes for the same setup with g6 here. But there's an issue, is that when black plays e6 and g6, it weakens a lot the dark squares, right? I mean, especially these ones. Mainly like f6 and d6 as well. Yeah, mainly the square actually. And this is a bit slow because black has already, wasted like a lot of time with all of the pawn moves, and white can actually play d4 directly. So it's important for black to actually prevent white from playing d4. Now, if black plays knight e7 here, obviously d5 just wins. Like e takes d5, e d5, the pawn is coming to d6 next, and white is just winning. If you play like knight b8 or something, just knight b5 is easily like winning because infiltration on d6 is coming, or even like d6 knight c7. So it's just really, really bad. So here after d4, black is forced to take on d4, and I will play knight takes d4. And essentially there's so many weaknesses on the dark squares that this position is not playable. Bishop g7 runs into knight d to b5, and again, like d6 is so weak. Bishop f8 is best, but now white plays knight d6 check, gets the bishop here, and we get a position like this where, of course, like white is completely dominating here with the pawn on e5. Much safer king, bishop pair, fantastic position. Black just can't move. So instead, black's best move is to play d5 already here, but this is not ideal. White just develops with bishop e3. We're not really afraid if they take on e4 because, of course, then the pawn structure would be just really, really bad here. Get a position like this. I'm sure like bishop e4 is good, and then followed by knight takes e4. This is just all like really, really bad stuff. So, yeah, here black's best move bishop g7, but now we play queen d2 and we simply like try to castle long. Yeah, I mean, like if black is not able to like get the king to safety very quickly, so black's best tries to just try to simplify the position with d takes e4, but now we ruin the pawn structure with knight takes e6, queen d2, bishop d2, bc6, and now knight takes e4. Now here, I mean, if black just doesn't want to be much worse with the worst pawn structure, then they have to play bishop takes b2, but after rook b1, bishop g7, and let's say bishop e3, which is not the only good move, but the point is to discourage like knight f6 here, because there is the move bishop d4 in response. Now, yeah, I mean, that would be kind of wishful, but we can see that here, black is a pawn up, but it doesn't really matter. White has tremendous activity with all of the pieces here. Yeah, and black is simply much worse. So, yeah, that essentially covers the move g6 here. Instead, black's best move is to play d5. And now, I mean, this makes sense. Like, black didn't do anything like wrong here. They're playing very logical chess by putting the pawn on d5 and fighting for the center. So here white should play bishop b5. Now, it's also possible actually to play the move d3. Now, the point is that if you enter this sort of endgame, I believe that white is actually a bit better. Let's say here you take with the knight. Now you can eventually put the pawn to c3. You can play the bishop to e3, and this pawn on c5 can be a bit weak in some cases. White also has like a nice space advantage, and because the queens are off the board, it's not really dangerous for white. So I believe, yeah, these positions are quite nice as well. Besides that, after d3, you can simply continue with like bishop e2 and castles and enjoy like a nice space advantage here. Black will try to get some typical counterplay, which is normal in the close Sicilian with b5, b4. But you can eventually like maneuver your pieces around, and maybe if the knight is ever kicked from c3, you can go to d1 and e3. And as long as you don't hang a pawn in the center, maybe you have potential of like advancing in the future. So that's possible. But in this position, I would recommend bishop e5. Okay, if black plays d4 here, trying to get some more space, we can actually just double the pawns here and just play knight e2, and we can get this sort of structure where I believe that white is just significantly like very, very comfortable here. Like b3 is coming next a4, and if we get the structure, black's double pawns are not really getting out. And I don't think that black has enough compensation or activity for the worst pawn structure. So here best is knight e7, defending the knight on c6. But now white can take on d5. If black plays knight takes d5 here, then white can play knight e5, and there is potential to just simply take the knight on c6. So if black plays bishop d7, we can simply take on c6 as well. And let's say we get a position like this. I believe that here, like, white should be fairly, white should have a fairly easy game. Like, white does not control the center as much, but these are double pawns, and a lot of pieces have been exchanged. So even in the endgame, this shouldn't be like super critical for black, or black shouldn't be able to take advantage of white's neglect of the center. So yeah, I would like these sort of positions, especially faster time control. So instead, black's best move is e65, but now white can play queen e2. Now this is an interesting way to play. Like for example, if black plays a6 here, then we can take on c6, and this is the point, right? We can double the pawns and we can just castle. And this is sort of awkward because black has put the knight on e7, and they can't really develop and castle that quickly. So I believe that white has a bit of an edge here. So it's better for black just to develop, maybe something like this. But now again, we can take on c6. Like, okay, I mean, if they want to like avoid that, maybe move like queen d6 is better, but white can play d4 in this sort of position. And now white is sort of fighting for the center, and black's pieces are not really well coordinated here. Like the knight on e7 is blocking their potential to develop the bishop and just castle, right? So this is quite nice, actually. So yeah, after e6, like that's sort of the positions you can expect. Here, the main move is g6, though. And after white plays knight f3, both knights develop first before developing the bishops, or in this case, to play the move a4. Now, of course, like this a4 move is basically just a waiting move. The point is to wait to see how black sets up their pieces, and only then, like decide where the bishop goes or whether to play e5, like after e6 and e5 here, right? So in this position, there are a couple moves as well. The move knight d4 is not really good. It's normally like strong because like black can maybe after white has castled, then maybe knight takes d4, bishop takes d4 is possible with a check. But in this position, white can just develop bishop c4 and just ignore the knight on d4 completely. After e6, and now white can play e5. So this is the big point. After e5, the threat is knight e4 next, right? So black should sort of take on f3 and then try to play d5 here. But the issue is that after e takes d6, and let's say queen takes d6, in normal circumstances, I would not like this structure because white is castled already in this position, because it runs into potential ideas of queen d4 check, and overall it's like not really good to accept this position where black's pieces are just dominating the b4 square. At least like strategically speaking, that's not good. But in this position, white has actually like a very nice idea here, just to play b3 and bishop b2, or even bishop a3. And so we're not actually castling that early. We want to simply play like bishop b2 or bishop a3. And we can notice that the queen is actually quite active on f3, preventing black from being able to develop the queen side. And so this bishop is also a bit passive, right? And so I believe that this position is actually quite interesting, and I think white has a slight edge. Black can like sort of try to develop the bishop with like bishop d7, bishop to c6, but white can play bishop b2, and there's a threat of knight b5 already. So, for example, knight f6, and now knight e4. Now black has some tactical issues to deal with. Knight h5 is best, but now we can take on g7, and now we can just castle. Preparing d4 next, and black is lacking the dark sword bishop. So what is actually already better here? For example, a position like this with queen h3 already looks like, yeah, very, very dangerous for black. So instead of that, in this position, it's probably best for black to play a6, covering the b5 square. But after bishop b2, again, there's a threat of knight b5. So knight f6, and now knight d1. I believe that this maneuver is quite interesting, and with the knight coming to e3 next, black doesn't really want to move the knight on f6 because it will allow the exchange of dark sword bishops, right? And then white would enjoy like a sort of structural advantage. So I believe that white is actually quite a bit active. Quite a bit more active here. So overall, this sort of structure after e takes e6, I would not like. And overall, d5 would be a strong move against this bishop on c4, because it essentially forces e takes d6, right? But in the position where we've already castled, it's probably not good to go for the structure. But when we haven't castled, then as I explained here, the idea of b3 and rerouting the knight over takes advantage of white's lead in development and extra space with the pawn on f4. So yeah, quite a nice position. So knight d4 is not really threatening here. Another move which is quite popular as well is the move a6. And I believe that this is actually a very clever idea. The idea is that white played the move a4, which is a waiting move, but now black also tosses the ball back to white, as in like to play a6. Now it asks white, like, where do you want to, put the bishop? Do you want to play bishop c4 now? But the issue is that, again, if bishop c4 is played, then after e6, black can play d5 really quickly, and I don't really like these positions. It's playable, like for example, something like here, knight e2, preparing c3 next, and we can get the sort of endgame, which, yeah, again, like I don't really like the bishop being on a2 here. So even in these endgames, I would prefer the bishop on e2. So yeah, this is sort of the reason that a6 is a very clever move. But after white plays d3 here, it's nice because the point is that, okay, black has sort of played a clever move with a6, played a nice waiting move, and so now we simply develop the bishop to e2. Black can play, for example, rook b8, trying to get in b5 as fast as possible, but again, bishop b2, very solid. b5, we can take on b5. Of course, we always take here because it can open up the a file for us. And after castles, here if black plays a move like b4, then we have this very typical maneuver, knight d5 to e3. If black is like, one sample slower, for example, with the move e6, then I'm already considering queen e1, so that it can meet b4 with knight d1 to e3. So, as long as the knight gets to e3, I think we're going to be doing okay. Our pieces are, coordinating like, okay, it's not horrible, basically. I mean, the knight gets kicked around, but it's not bad here. So after b4, we can play knight d5, e6, knight e3. Now knight g7, and of course, once we've castled, we've played the move f40. The idea is to just bring the queen over to the king side with queen e1. Castles, and even in this position, it's also possible to play the move h4, introducing the idea of h5 next. So black doesn't really want to allow this. h5 and potentially the queen coming in, knight g5 can open up the h file, and that would be quite dangerous. So here h5 is best, but after g4, it gets really interesting here. f5, we can play knight g to e5, and overall the position is balanced, but it's a very this position has never been seen before already on move 16, and it's a very double-edged game. So yeah, sort of unclear positions are, I believe, not only good against people who are weaker than us, but against stronger players. When they get an unfamiliar position, it can confuse them and sort of give us a practical edge. When both of us, both white and black are facing new positions, we're basically on equal territory. So yeah, that's possible. It's possible to play that way. I mean, there's some other lines here that are possible, but essentially that's the gist of it. We can always bring the knight over to e3 whenever black is b4, right? So yeah, that's possible. And here, the move d6 is quite interesting. I mean, yeah, but the issue is that white has the move bishop e5. Now, the reason, I mean, here even bishop c4 is quite playable, but I would like to play the move bishop e5 because it introduces ideas of bishop c6, and if black plays the move bishop d7, which is probably the best move, then the bishop is a bit misplaced. It doesn't want to be on d7 here. So, yeah, for example, we could play bishop c4, get a position like this, black can play e6, d3, knight e7, castles, and d5 would be possible here, I think. And we can get a game. And again, I wouldn't like these sort of positions where the bishop is forced back to an e2. So instead, after d6, bishop e5, again, our typical is d3, castles, bring the queen over to e1 and h4 whenever black has castled, and try to set up some f5 ideas, potentially, to open up our bishop on this diagonal. So yeah, black should play bishop d7. Here, I actually like the move bishop c6. This is, I think, a more clever move order. The idea is after bishop c6, d3, black is not able to play the move knight d4, right? Because that was a possibility after we played d3. Black can't play the move d4 here. Now we can just castle, for example, and get this sort of position. White is a relatively good score, but I even like the move bishop c6 here because it basically simplifies our task. We don't need to deal with the move knight d4 next, right? After e6, castles, knight e7, queen e1. While black's best move is probably just to castle, right? Otherwise, for example, if they play a move like a6, maybe preparing b5, here we can already play the move a5, and this prevents black from playing b5 next and getting a lot of queenside counterplay, right? So next move is just bishop e3. Again, if black delays castling, then we can just play bishop e3, and potentially we're already looking to open up the position with d4. So if black doesn't do that, I mean, for example, castles here, I'm sure d4 here is even quite good. Yeah, and computer says that it's probably the only way to reach objective equality. But even here, queen h4 doesn't look that bad. And knight g5 is coming. Whenever black plays h6, the knight can drop back to h3. And again, we can introduce ideas of f5 here. For example, rook a to d8. Potentially f5 here is already very interesting because we can sack the pawn this way. And it seems like black needs to be really careful here with knight g5 coming. Another idea is also, if we are lacking firepower, we can just play king h1, rook g1 and g4, opening up the position and potentially trying to use our rook in the attack. So it looks quite nice. So yeah, that's a very basic shortcut against the move d6, right? Now against e6, there's a bit more to know because we are going to play the move e5. Yeah, and after e5 here, black has a couple moves. Even the move knight g7 is actually possible. After knight e4, black can castle this way. And in this position, the problem about taking the pawn on c5 is that black can play the move d6, and they're going to open up the position. For example, e d6, queen d6, knight d3. I mean, okay, our f pawn is being hit, and so is our knight. So we're forced to play knight d3, and our coordination is really bad here. Yeah, I mean, if we can play c3, d4, and just consolidate the extra pawn, we would be better. But that's not the case, right? So in this position, it's actually better just to play c3. Now the idea is that we can take on c5 next. For example, if black plays a careless move like a6, now we can take on c5. Because d6 allows the move d4, and we're defending our f4 pawn, our knight on c5 is perfectly supported, and we have just simply a free pawn. So here black's best move is to play b6, just defending the pawn on c5, and now I like to introduce this idea of h4. Again, very similar to the position before. It's actually quite possible to play this way because black's best move is probably just to play h5 directly. But now after d3, we can play bishop e2, castles, and at some point we can use the g5 square and maybe even push the pawn to g4, creating a strong attack. So these positions are practically just a bit better for white. And yeah, it's just really easy play here. So after h4, black can also play the move d5. this is quite a typical idea. If you take on d6, black wants to play knight f5, and they're just claiming that your move c3 doesn't really make that much sense because you wanted to play d4, but that's not really possible now, right? With so many pieces controlling that square. Also, you've given up a huge portion of the center. So here it's better just to stick the knight on d6. Black can play d4, preventing us from playing d4. But now there's a very interesting move here, which is b4. Okay, if you take on b4 here, I'm suspecting just c takes d4. Looks quite nice here. Or even c takes b4. Yeah, apparently this is better with knight takes b4. Or probably knight takes d4, bishop a3. Gets fantastic compensation here. Like something like this would already look like really nice for white. Yeah, essentially like, yeah, it's a very like nice idea. Just sacrifice the pawn this way. So yeah, if we get h5, d3, then this is quite nice as well. So after e5, again, as I covered, the move d5 here just runs into the move d4. Now, it's also possible to play knight b5 here, but the issue is that black has to move bishop f8. And ideally, you know, for example, if you try to get the same positions before, it doesn't really work out because here, black can take on d4 and put the bishop on b4. Now, their bishop is actually a lot better on b4 than it is on g7, right? So here, actually, black has an edge because this knight is under pressure. So, it's important, yeah, for example, in this position to play d4 directly. And we're ready to actually just get a good version of a French defense with the bishop on g7 just being quite poor. Again, c takes d4 runs into knight b5, bishop f8, knight takes d4. For example, a line like this would be already quite nice for white. Important is to not take on d4 with the pawn, because now this pawn can actually be kind of a weakness. For example, black can play bishop b4. Let's say we bring the king to f2. This pawn in these sort of endgames, or whenever we reach the simplified position, can become weak. Like for example, black can play like rook c8, rook c4, potentially like when this bishop is gone. Also like trying to infiltrate with the queen here on c2. Now it's probably playable here, but I would be sort of concerned that this pawn on d4 is weak. So that's sort of why you play knight takes d4 here. And in this position, you just have like sort of a nice advantage with bishop e3, bishop d3, castles, and potentially maybe, you know, if black is sort of slow, then g4 f5 is a serious idea here. But other than that, like white is just enjoying a nice advantage. So here best is probably for black to play a6, covering the b5 square. But now we'll play knight e2. Now we're coordinating perfectly here. Again, like c takes d4 just allows a very nice structure with c3, bishop e3, and the bishop d3 next, right? And if they play bishop f8, trying to improve the bishop's position and claiming, you know, maybe the last move was a mistake, then now white plays c3. And simply with bishop e3 next, it's a very nice center. Sooner or later, black has to take on d4 if they don't want to lose a pawn. So yeah, white can take with the e-pawn, with the e-knight, and eventually develop and just castle with a really nice position. Okay, so that's the move d5. Here, black's best move is again the move d6, but now we'll play bishop b5. Of course, the idea is to release some of the pressure on the e5 pawn. Again, like we don't want to take on d6. This is again something that I'm gonna have to repeat because the pawn on f4 is weak. Black has tremendous control over the d4 square, and so white doesn't really have an advantage here. Actually, like black's already better. So after bishop e5, if black does take on e5 here, then white can take on c6 and play f takes e5. And we can see here that there are like some key like weaknesses here with the double pawns, with the square on d6, and black is just simply much worse here. So black always needs to be careful about these double pawns on c6. So black's best move is knight e7, and then white plays knight e4. So here again, d takes e5 is the best move, otherwise black is going to lose a pawn. So d e5, f takes e5, castles, and then knight f6 check. So in this position, if black plays the move king h8, which is the most popular move, then this move d4 is really powerful. The idea is that we're sacrificing a pawn, but we're opening with the bishop diagonal really quickly. For example, knight takes e4 here allows us to play c3. And all of the lines here are just really good for white. I'll show you some lines here. Knight d to f5 allows queen takes d8. And if we get this position, after knight g5, black is simply in a bind. They can't do anything. I mean, rook f8 is possible, but yeah, potentially like g4 or just castles is like extremely good. So here knight e6, but now here knight takes h7 as well. I mean, also like, yeah, probably a rook f8 runs into like knight h7 as well, just like losing a pawn. Probably this way. This way is also really good. But yeah, either case, it's like just a really good position. So best is for black to play on h6, but then again, white will take on h6, on h7, and even look to open up the position of the black king with h4, h5 next. And this is a really crushing advantage. So knight d to f5 is not good. If black takes on b5 here, then now we can exchange off the queens and play the move knight g5. Again, this tactical idea is in the air. So black is forced to play rook f8, but now it takes b5. Now we have the open a file. We have still some pressure on h7. So here black plays bishop takes f6, which is very likely. Then after in this position, white just simply has a nice advantage here because the knight can be kicked from the d5 square with c4. The knight can also jump to e5. This bishop on c is passive, and this pawn on c5 is actually extremely weak here. So white also has a nice advantage in this position. So instead of that, after rook f8, okay, like so let's say here black can play h6, but now knight comes to e4, and we have just like a massive bind on the position. Like I've analyzed some moves here, like bishop f6, but let's say we get this position, the knight comes to d6, bishop comes to f4. Black, white is a pawn down, but black is in a complete bind here. They just can't move. Yeah, so fantastic position. Instead, they can take on f3 here, trying to simplify the position. But here, white maintains a nice positional advantage with a6, bishop comes to e2, and of course, like white's idea is just to play bishop g5, which is quite typical. Bring the queen over to h3 and create some threats on on h7 there. So queen c7 is best, but now queen h3 again, threatening h7. So bishop takes f6, e takes f6, knight d5, and now queen h4. White can castle first as well, but the point is that I want to show this queen h4 idea. And the point is that, white has the bishop pair, white is a pawn down, but it doesn't really matter. Black's position is way too weak here, right? And this knight on d5 can be kicked with the move c4 next. So really good position as well. So here, essentially black cannot take on d4 with the knight, right? Which is why it's best to take on d4 with the pawn. But now here white will play bishop g5, increasing the pressure. If black plays h6, then again h4, right? And positions like very similar to what we will see. Here, black has tried the move queen a5, tried a couple times, but now white will play queen d2. And this initiates the exchange of queens here. For example, if we exchange like this, okay, I mean, we are potentially just like wanting to exchange on a5 and just take the d4 pawn. So black is sort of obliged to take on d2, king takes e2, and in this endgame, it's just like black is just stuck in a complete bind. Knight g8, we can take on c6, typical, and play h4 again. And now the idea is to play h5 directly. For example, h6 is met with h5, takes, rook h2, and just doubling up. And this is just crushing already. So really nice position. If black plays h5 now, then white can play g4 still, and then h5. And now this is even worse. Black is just getting completely crushed with the h file already opened. So instead of that, black can play maybe knight d5. A bit more logical to place the knight in the center. But now we can play bishop takes c6 again. bc6, and now h4 again, introducing this idea. h6, and now h5 again. Knight f6, e takes f6, h takes g5, h takes g6, and this is the beautiful position as we see. King g8, f takes g7, attacking the rook now, so black has to take on g7, and now after g takes f7, we can see this position, g4, rook g4, and we get this position. Now this position has been reached once before, and I think that after the next move, which is an improvement over the game, rook h4, white is also like significantly better here. So even though black has the central pawn majority here, the point is that the black king is so exposed, and they can't really advance any of the pawns without them being weaker. So this is just dominant, essentially. Black will have a hard time defending this position. So yeah, that's one of the possible lines that can be seen in case black plays king h8. Now, after castles knight f6, best is actually just to play bishop takes f6. Now, after e takes f6, black can play either the move knight f5 or knight d5. Here, better is knight f5. If black plays knight d5, then we can take on c6 again. As soon as the knight leaves e7, not defending the c6 knight, we can take here, and then now we can play d3. And this is even better than the position that we will see later with the knight on f5, because white can castle, just take advantage of the fact that pawn on f6 is just so powerful, and even if we're sacrificing this pawn, it doesn't matter. We're just going to castle next. Queen f6, castles, and this is a fantastic position already. Yeah, I mean, it's already plus 0.5, but practically speaking, this is quite difficult for black to defend. So here, black should play the move knight f5, and now I like taking on c6 first. I think, but it doesn't really, the move order doesn't matter too much, but I like taking on c6 first just to prevent any ideas of knight d4. Also, it's a general rule of thumb, right? As soon as the knight leaves e7, we can take on c6 here. But okay, we'll look at it from this move order of castling, and then now taking on c6 followed by d3. Now in this position, the best move for black to play, and probably the only move that can equalize, is the move c4, which, black maybe is tempted to play a move like bishop a6, but turns out after queen e1, c4 is not possible because of queen a5. And let's say queen c5 here, this is even better than d takes e4, because this potentially allows black to play c5 and get some activity for the pieces. But here, white just plays queen c5, preventing black from playing c5, opening up the bishop, and if we get a position like this, yeah, I mean, this is according to the computer, bishop e3, black should take on c5, and yeah, simply like, yeah, black is, I think, losing material here with like two of the knights hanging. Here instead, black can play knight d6 here, but after c takes d3, yeah, black is a pawn up, but white's advantages can be felt here. Black is lacking the restored bishop. Bishop is awful. All of the pieces are not coordinating well together, so white has a very nice position. So instead of that, black's best move is c4, but now we can take on c4. Black's idea is to get the rook to d8, and now we can play queen e1. I like this move slightly better than queen e2 because after queen e2 it does allow the move knight d4, right? After queen e1 though, knight d4 is possible, but I believe that we're not. Yeah, I mean here, I guess here the move knight e5, which I'm kind of forgetting here. So yeah, it just simply wins because the pawn on f7 is falling next, and Black's king is just too weak. So in this sort of position, I think the chances are sort of balanced, but Black is missing the door square bishop, right? And so if anyone's fighting for an edge, I would say that it's white. Also here, bishop g5 is a huge threat. So, you know, you can disagree, you can agree or disagree with me, but essentially I believe that this position is quite practical, and all of the traps that Black had to avoid early on are quite serious, right? So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. It was somewhat useful. If you do end up playing the system or have played the system in the past, please let me know what you think about it and, you know, what is your experience with it. So thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.